The raven came at dawn, black wings cutting through the gray sky over Winterfell. Jon Snow watched it from the battlements, gloved hands resting on cold stone. The morning was clear in that brittle way northern mornings could be. Every breath a small, white ghost, every sound sharpened by frost. Below, the yard bustled as men shuffled through drills to keep their blood from freezing, and smiths hammered at dragonglass edges that rang thin and strange against steel. The raven circled once, twice, and then arrowed down to the rookery tower. Jon did not move at first. Ravens came and went. Most brought nothing he wished to hear, but something in the pattern of its flight, the way it cut against the wind without effort, dug claws into his chest. He pushed off the battlement and went down. The corridor stones carried the chill of the wall. For a heartbeat he was there again, the wind off the haunted forest in his teeth, the endless white pressing in from every side, the shadows between the trees moving where no wind stirred. He blinked and pushed the memory away. Maester Wolkan stood at the high, narrow window in the rookery, the raven perched on his wrist, black eyes as flat and empty as old obsidian. The maester turned as Jon entered, his breath fogging in front of his gray beard. "My lord." Wolkan corrected himself quickly, eyes dropping. "Your grace." Jon had never grown used to that, and doubted he ever would. A crown wasn't a thing you wore on your head. It was something that settled on your bones. "The raven?" Jon asked. Wolkan nodded, a nervous tick jumping in his cheek. "It came with no mark I recognize. No ribbon, no seal. Only this." He extended his other hand. A small shard lay on his palm, catching the thin light, dark, glassy, veined with faint blue frost. Dragonglass. Jon reached for it, and the world narrowed to the slow curl of his fingers. The shard was no larger than his thumb, blunt at one end, wickedly sharp at the other, like a sliver chipped from a larger blade. Cold bled into his glove. He turned it and saw, etched so finely he almost missed it, a sigil. Not a sigil made by human hand. It was a crude thing, rough lines carved by something that hadn't cared overmuch for craft. A circle of tiny marks, like a ring of standing stones, with a jag of something like a tree at its center. Or a crack, or a bolt of lightning frozen in glass. He had seen that shape before. Jon's throat tightened. "This came with the bird?" "Yes, your grace. Tied to its leg." Wolkan swallowed. "There is no parchment, no writing, only the shard." A wind that wasn't the wind off the window touched Jon's skin, icy fingers stealing under his collar, skimming the back of his neck. For an instant he heard nothing but the old, remembered sound of the dead marching in the snow. The grind of ice, the brittle clatter of frozen bone, the faint, almost polite crunch of a boot that no longer needed to lift. He closed his fist around the dragonglass. The shard bit through leather and into skin, a line of pain as sharp and clean as Winterfell's air. He did not flinch. "Has Bran been told?" Jon asked. "Yes, your grace. The boy," Wolkan faltered. "The Lord. He already knows, I think." Of course he does, Jon thought, and hated the small, instinctive sting that came with it. There was a time when he had been the one who saw first, who gauged the winds and the enemy on the far side of the world. Now his brother, or whatever Bran was now, sat in a chair beneath the weirwood and stared through eyes that weren't always his own. Jon shoved that aside like he had shoved aside the pain from the shard. "Send word to the Lady of Winterfell," he said, "and to Daenerys Targaryen. We meet in the Great Hall. Now." Wolkan bowed his head. The raven shifted, claws scraping the maester's wrist. Its head turned, fixing Jon with a look too still to be a simple bird's regard. In its eye, for the length of a heartbeat, he saw the reflection of ice. Then it blinked, and the rookery was just a cold stone room again. Jon turned and left, the shard burning cold in his hand. Sansa stood at the far end of the table, fingers resting lightly on the carved direwolf. Her eyes were not on the map, but on the doors, as if she had been listening for Jon's step. She had braided her hair like their mother's, a practical knot at the nape of her neck, but some part of it still fell like copper over her shoulder, catching fire from the hearthlight. She looked every inch the Lady of Winterfell now. The girl Jon had left to ride south with his uncle had burned away somewhere in the smoke of King's Landing and the snow of the Eyrie. Daenerys stood at the opposite side of the table, near enough to the dragon carved into the wood that its stylized head almost brushed her sleeve. Her hair was pulled into those intricate braids the Dothraki favored for their warriors. The white of her fur-lined cloak was too pure for the room, as if some wandering snowdrift had taken human form and come to stand among dark northern wood. Ghost lay at Jon's feet, nothing more than a pale smudge against the rushes to anyone who didn't know him. To Jon he was a low, constant presence. Eyes like coals, breath like mist. Bran sat near the hearth, his chair drawn up close enough that the heat brushed his pale hands. Arya leaned against the stone column behind him, half in shadow, watching everyone and nothing in particular. Her hand rested on the hilt of the sword at her hip, fingers curled as if around the memory of a different knife. They had been waiting. Jon placed the shard on the map between the scattered wooden armies, where the painted wall cut across the cold wood. The room seemed to grow colder. Daenerys's gaze sharpened. "What is that?" "Dragonglass," Sansa said. Her voice had that calm that meant she was anything but. "We have cartloads of it in the crypts now, Your Grace. Why is this one special?" Jon did not answer her first. He looked to Bran. His brother's eyes, too old, too distant, met his. For a moment something like sympathy flickered in them, too brief to be sure. "It came with a raven," Jon said. "No seal, no writing. Maester Wolkin says it flew straight from the north." "From beyond the wall," Bran said softly. "Not straight, but true." Daenerys frowned. "It could be a trick. A shard picked up in Eastwatch, sent by some fool who thinks himself clever." "That's not any carving from Eastwatch," Arya said, pushing off the column. She came forward, eyes narrowing as she peered down. "That's ugly." Bran's mouth twitched at the corner, nearly a smile. "Old," he corrected. "Older than the wall. Older than men." The carved symbol on the shard seemed to pulse in the firelight, shadows deepening in its etched grooves. "I've seen that shape," Jon said quietly, "at the Fist of the First Men, when we found the horses." Arya shifted. Her hand went to her other weapon, the dragonglass dagger at her belt, touching it as one might touch a charm without knowing it. "When the dead left you a gift," Bran said. "When he did, he not they." Jon noticed the distinction and hated that he understood it. "What does it mean?" Sansa asked. "What does he want?" For a long moment no one answered. The fire cracked. A log shifted in the hearth. Then Bran said, "A meeting." Daenerys's furrow deepened. "You cannot mean." "He called the creatures of the forest before the first men had names for their own shadows," Bran said. "He called storms not by supplication, but by memory. What you call ravens were his eyes long before they bore Maester's scrolls. He knows how to send a message. He knows how to leave a corpse nailed to a wall for us to find," Arya said. "That doesn't mean he wants to talk." Bran's gaze were somewhere beyond the stone ceiling now, beyond Winterfell, beyond snow and night. "He has offered parley before, but no one listened. No one understood. The dead leave a message and the living see only horror. Because that's what it is," Sansa snapped. "Because that's what he is." Jon's hand had curled into a fist on the table edge. A strip of leather peeled away where the dragonglass had pierced it. Blood smeared the map like a fresh wound across the painted wall. "He wants a meeting," Jon said, forcing his voice to stay level. "Where?" Bran's eyes closed. The room held its breath. Arya watched him with her head tilted slightly, as if she were looking at a stranger who wore her brother's face as a mask. Daenerys watched him with the wary respect of someone who understood power even if she did not like the way it looked. Sansa watched him with the naked ache of a girl who remembered a boy climbing walls and falling from a tower, and could not reconcile that boy with this being before her. When Bran spoke again, it was in a voice that filled the room despite its softness. "On the lake," he said. "Where you first saw him, Jon. Where the dragon fell." Daenerys flinched as if struck. Not in sight of the wall, Bran went on. Not in the forest. On the ice. Just there, Arya asked. On the open lake like he wants you to be a target? He has no need of traps, Bran said. You know that. Jon felt ghosts stir against his boot, a low rumble vibrating through the direwolf's chest. You can't possibly be considering this, Sansa said. Tell me you aren't. Daenerys's eyes were on Jon now, intent and burning. Your sister is right. The dead do not bargain. They destroy. Whatever game this creature plays, he plays it with corpses. Jon looked down at the shard between their hands. The etched ring of stones, the jagged tree or crack or lightning at its center. Memory tightened around his throat. He spoke to me, Jon said. Silence fell so hard it was almost a sound. In my dreams, he went on, before any of them could press the word mad at him. For nights now, not with words, not the way we speak, but I woke with frost on my breath and his presence in my skull, like a hand pressing against glass from the wrong side. Jon, Sansa began. He knew I would come north again, Jon said, ignoring the protest. He knew we would bring fire to his realm. He knew your dragons would fly over his dead. He knew more than we did. That much is obvious, Daenerys said grimly. Jon raised his eyes to hers. And he wants to talk. Daenerys stared at him, searching his face for something. Doubt, madness, the crack in his resolve. Whatever it was, she didn't find it. Why you? She asked. Jon let out a breath that could have been a laugh on a kinder day. I've been asking myself that for years. Bran opened his eyes. Because he knows you, he said. He marked you. Through me, through what I did, he touched you as well. When you crossed that narrow bridge of ice and faced him with nothing but a sword and stubbornness, he was not surprised. Something moved behind Bran's gaze, a flicker of guilt, of memory of his own part in awakening an ancient power that had once slumbered beyond the world's cast-off stories. He has seen you die and come back, Bran said. There are only so many such men in the world. Those who have walked in shadow and returned carry a scent to beings like him. Death calls to death, Arya murmured. Jon remembered the black, suffocating nothing, the cold beyond cold, the hands dragging him back. Not Melisandre's hands, not ghosts, hands that might have been warm once, that had belonged to men who had chosen him as their Lord Commander and then stabbed him like a dog. He swallowed. What does he want? Daenerys asked. Beyond a meeting. Why speak when he could simply march and kill us all where we stand? Bran's gaze slid back to the shard. A pact, he said, older than any throne, older even than the wall, the first and last bargain of this world. A pact, Sansa repeated, with the thing that's been sending corpses at us since before we were born. Jon felt the way. Tea of all their eyes, like stones layered one atop another on his back. He was used to it by now. He doubted he would ever bear it easily. Then I have to hear it, he said. Daenerys's hands tightened on the table edge, knuckles whitening. You mean we have to hear it? Jon shook his head. No, just me. Her gaze sharpened, dangerous. If you think I will let you ride out alone to treat with that, you won't let me? Jon asked quietly. The edge in his voice made her stop. They stared at one another across the map as if across an abyss. You are king in the north, Sansa said into the taut silence. But you are not a fool. Walking alone onto that lake is suicide. So is facing him without knowing what he wants, Jon said. He knows I'm here. He sent for me. If I refuse, he marches anyway and we go to war blind. If I go, maybe we learn something that keeps us alive. Or he kills you and uses your corpse to pull down the gates, Arya said. Her eyes had lost their lazy, amused light now. They were knives in a face that remembered too much. That's what I'd do if I were him. He doesn't want a corpse, Bran said. Not yet. Jon wished that comforted him. It did not. He wants something else, Bran went on. He wants choice. is yours. A bargain requires consent. That was the law the children bound into him when he was made what he is. He cannot unmake the world without being offered the chance not to. Sansa exhaled. Frustration and fear coiled in the sound. And if he offers a choice no sane man could take? Then we refuse, Jon said. And die, Arya added. We're going to die anyway if we don't do something, Jon said. I'd rather walk onto that ice with my eyes open. Daenerys's jaw clenched. You will not go alone. He turned to her. If he sees you, he'll see the dragons. If he sees the dragons, he'll want to destroy them first. You know that. He already wants to destroy them. Then we don't give him the chance to trap us. One dragon fell through that ice already. I won't risk the other two. And what of me? She asked. Am I to sit here by your fire and wait like some southern lady while you walk into the dark? Her anger kindled his, though he had not meant for it to. I've walked into the dark before, he said. That's the only reason any of you are still alive to argue with me. Arya's mouth twitched, almost smile, almost grimace, as if she wanted to say something that would cut him and instead swallowed it. Bran watched them without expression. Whatever storm raged outside, inside his head there was only endless sky and endless roots. Jon is right, Bran said. Daenerys's head snapped toward him. He would be less threat alone than with a dragon, Bran continued. If she flies above the lake, he will see it as a challenge. He will call every spear, every storm, every frozen thing beneath the ice. He resents fire. He would tear open the lake to drown it. A memory flared behind Daenerys's eyes. Viserion screaming as the ice spike burst from his neck, gold and red and blood streaming from torn wings as he crashed through cold blue and vanished. Her fingers trembled where they gripped the table. She stilled them by force. You speak of him as if you understand him, she said to Bran. Bran blinked, slow. I understand enough. Enough to know he does not lie. He has no need. When he speaks, the world changes to follow. Then perhaps we should not let him speak at all, Sansa said. He will speak whether we listen or not, Bran said. Jon drew in a breath that felt too thin for his lungs. I'll go, he said, with Ghost, with dragonglass and steel. No banners, no dragons, no armies. No, Sansa said. At the same time Daenerys hissed. You're mad. Arya merely watched him, her face unreadable. You made me king because I'd do what had to be done, Jon said. Not because I'd sit in a hall and listen to my counselors argue until the dead clawed at our doors. I know what waits beyond that wall. I know what he is. If there is a chance, any chance, that parley buys us more than charging blind, I have to take it. Daenerys took a step around the table toward him, furs whispering against the stone floor. Heat and something like fear burned in her eyes. And if he does not honor this pact you imagine? She demanded. If he simply takes you, marks you again, breaks whatever leash these children you speak of laid upon him, you go to him, and what stops him from turning you into a weapon against us? Another dragon made of death, another sword held in his hand. Me, Jon said. She stared at him. I've made vows before, Jon said. As a brother of the Night's Watch, as Lord Commander, as other things. I've broken some. I won't break this. Even if he offers me, I won't let him turn me on you. How can you promise that? Sansa asked, voice suddenly thin. If he reaches into your head and uses you like he used Bran. Bran's fingers tightened on the arms of his chair. He never truly used me, he said. I stepped onto his road of my own will. I let him touch me. I went looking for him in the storm. I thought I could watch without being seen. He shifted his gaze to Jon. You know the cost of that hubris. It walked into your home on blue feet. Jon remembered the silent march of the dead through the shattered gates of the cave, the three-eyed raven dissolving into snow and memory under the Night King's hand, Hodder's body shaking with effort as he held the door against an ocean of white. I am not a boy in a cave, Jon said. I know what he can do. I know what happens if we stand here and wait. Daenerys looked at him for a long time, as if memorizing his face. The plains of it. The scar near his eye. The stubborn line of his jaw that had driven her mad from the moment she first saw it in the icy courtyard of Winterfell. Take Rhaegal, she said at last. You will not ride him, but he will fly above the clouds. If anything changes, he can carry word back faster than any raven. Jon hesitated. If he sees a dragon, he will not, Daenerys said. Rhaegal knows how to hide in mist, how to fly where eyes cannot reach. I will not let you go beyond the world with nothing watching over you. Rhaegal won't land on that lake, Jon said. He won't have to. There was iron in her voice that Jon recognized. It matched the iron in his own. He inclined his head. Very well. Take me, Arya said suddenly. All eyes swung to her. I can walk where he can't see, Arya went on. I can get close. If he tries to twist you, I can cut his throat. Rhaenys crept into her tone at the last word, as if she knew how foolish it sounded to talk of cutting an ancient spirit's throat. But her eyes were deadly serious. No, Jon said. Arya's brows snapped together. I know how to move on ice. I've killed bigger men than you think. You can't do this alone, and you know it. I do know it, Jon said. That's why I'm taking Ghost. She snorted. Your dog can't stab anything. Wolf, Jon corrected automatically. And I said no. The room tensed. Arya's jaw worked. Then she shrugged, the movement exaggerated. Fine. Die alone, then. She pushed away from the table and stalked toward the doors, shoulders tight. Arya, Sansa called after her. But the younger Stark did not turn. The doors banged shut behind her. Silence settled over the hall like new snow. Jon let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. I leave at dusk, he said. Daenerys's fingers flexed once more on the table and then loosened. I will be on the battlements when you return, she said. He heard the if as clearly as if she had spoken it. The wind off the lake smelled of nothing. Jon had never noticed before how much the world smelled until he rode into a place where scent seemed to have been cut out of the air. No pine, no distant rot of leaves under snow, no smoke from fires further south on the Frostfangs. Only cold. Pure, clean, killing absence. Ghost padded at his stirrup, pale for all but vanishing into the white. The wolf's breath came out in slow, steady gusts. His ears were pricked forward, his body loose but ready. They had ridden from Winterfell under a sky of bruised steel, the land flattening as they neared the wall. Jon had chosen only one companion for the journey. Davos Seaworth, who rode silent and grim at his side until the shadow of the wall fell over them and he pulled on his reins. This is as far as I go, your grace, Davos had said at the edge of the castle's long shadow. I've no wish to make the acquaintance of blue-eyed corpses any closer than necessary. Jon had almost smiled at that, but the expression wouldn't quite form. You've stood against worse odds. I still don't mean I liked it. Davos had glanced up at the wall, at the gray-blue immensity of it. Someone needs to be ready to light the beacons if this goes to shit. Jon had nodded. They had clasped hands in that rough, brief way that men who did not talk about their feelings did. And then Jon had ridden alone through the open gate and into the land beyond. Now the wall was a distant bruise on the horizon behind him, a jagged tooth of blue against the sky. Before him spread the frozen lake, a vast sheet of dull white stretching into a mist that rose from its far edges. The ice cracked here and there in faint, distant pops, like knuckles flexing. He dismounted where the shore ended and the lake began. The snow was hard-packed at the edge, nearly as slick as the ice itself. Jon's boots slid once and then found purchase. He looped the horse's reins over a jut of frozen rock. The animal shivered but held. Ghost trotted ahead, testing the ice with a cautious paw. It held. He glanced back at Jon, tongue lolling for a moment, as if to say, well? Jon stepped onto the lake. The first step was the worst. Every instinct screamed at him. The ice felt thin, fragile as the crust on a puddle in Winterfell's yard. But his weight did not break it. The second step was easier. The third easier still. By the 10th, he had remembered that this lake had held armies. It had held a dragon until it did not. The memory of that moment knifed through him. The crack of the spear, the way Viserion's body had twisted in the air, blood and fire streaming as he fell. He kept walking. Ghost ranged ahead, a pale smudge against pale air. Jon's breath grew more shallow as the cold seeped through his furs, through his mail, through skin and bone. Every exhale hung around him like a cloud. Above, the sky was the color of old milk, heavy and low. Somewhere beyond that, hidden in the clouds, Regal flew. Jon could not see him, but every now and then he heard the faint, distant rush of wings, like a sigh brushing the world. When he had walked far enough that the shore was a gray line behind him and the center of the lake lay open and empty before him, Jon stopped. He stood, boots planted, hands at his sides. The lake was silent. He did not call out. He did not know what name to use, and some stubborn part of him refused to give the Night King any name at all. He waited. The cold deepened. It didn't feel like air anymore. It felt like something else, something that seeped from the ice into his marrow. The hairs on his arms rose under his sleeves. Ghost's hackles lifted. A low growl rumbled in the wolf's chest. Mist moved on the far side of the lake. It hadn't been there a moment before. Jon knew that with the clarity of a man counting the beats of his heart. One moment the horizon was dull and gray. The next, a low bank of fog coiled over the ice, thick and white, rolling toward him with slow, deliberate grace. Ghost bared his teeth. His growl sharpened. The mist reached the place where the ice darkened over deeper water and slowed. It gathered itself, densening, twisting. Shapes moved within it, tall and thin and wrong. The dead emerged in a line. They spree, at across the ice like the teeth of a comb. Whites in tattered furs, bare skulls turning in jerks, mouths torn away or frozen in silent screams. Some still wore the remnants of the black cloaks of the Watch. Others wore nothing but frost. Blue light burned in their eyes, bright as stars, dead as glaciers. They stopped a dozen paces away from Jon and stood, swords and axes in their hands, breathless, motionless. The mist thickened behind them, a curtain of white. And then he came. The Night King stepped out of the fog without hurry, without sound, as if he had always been standing there and the world had simply taken this long to notice. He was as Jon remembered, and more. Tall, his limbs too long for a man's but too precisely proportioned for a beast's. His armor was a thing of ice, ridged and layered as if grown rather than forged, faint blue light running along its filigreed lines like trapped lightning. His skin was the color of old snow under moonlight. Horns of ice crowned his skull, curling back from a face that had never known warmth. His eyes were blue. Jon had seen blue eyes before. He had seen them in babes and in the men of the Vale and in the pale faces of Umber and Karstark men. This was not that. This was blue the way absence was empty, a color that erased everything else. Cold so intense it seemed to burn. The Night King walked until only 4 paces separated them. He stopped. Ghost's snarl cut the chill, wild and alive. The wolf took 2 steps forward, fur bristling, teeth bared in their full, savage line. The Night King did not look at Ghost. His eyes were on Jon. The world narrowed to that gaze. There were no words. There did not need to be. Something brushed the inside of Jon's skull, like fingers made of winter pressing against his mind. Not forceful, not yet. Testing. Measuring the thickness of the glass. Jon's hand went to the hilt of Longclaw. He did not draw it. He merely rested his fingers there, grounding himself in leather and steel. You came. The thought was not in his own voice, nor any human tongue. It was an impression more than a word. The sense of a stone that had forgotten what it meant to move, noticing a drop of water on its surface and feeling, for the first time, the possibility of change. I did, Jon said aloud. His voice sounded small in the white expanse, but it did not tremble. You called. The blue gaze did not flicker. Behind the Night King, The wall of whites stood silent. "You have died," the presence observed. Jon's lips thinned. Once, twice the thought corrected. "Death in blood, death in ice. You are a crack in your own story." Images flashed behind Jon's eyes. Himself on the ground at Castle Black, blood pooling from a dozen stab wounds. Himself sinking beneath the lake, armor dragging him down as cold teeth closed above. The feeling of lungs burning empty, of darkness rushing up. "I did not invite either," Jon said. "All bargains are invitations." Ghost stepped closer to him, pressing his flank against Jon's leg. Jon's fingers slid from Longclaw to the thick fur, curling there. "You spoke of a pact," Jon said. "What is it you want?" The ice under his boots creaked, a long, low groan that might have been the lake shifting or the world answering. The Night King tilted his head. The motion was small, almost curious. When his gaze shifted, Jon's stomach lurched, as if the ground had rolled beneath him. The eyes did not merely look. They weighed. They measured. "You call me Night King," the presence said. "Walker. Other. You give me names as if that will make me yours." "I didn't choose them," Jon said. "Men did that long before I was born. Children's names," the thought dismissed. "Snow calling flame hot. Sand calling sea wet. Names do not bind me." "Then what does?" Jon asked. The place where a mouth might once have been did not move. Nothing in that face moved. It did not need to. The snow in Jon's mind shifted, and with it came the sense of something deep and vast turning in an old bed. "Story binds," the presence said. "Memory. Bargain. The first wound and the last." The mist behind him stirred. Shapes moved within it, half-formed, shifting between animal and root and shadow. Jon caught the impression of eyes in the fog, dark and wide, not blue, not human. He heard, faint as a whisper under ice, the creak of wooden faces. "The children," Jon said quietly. "They bound me," the Night King said, "with dragonglass and blood and the memory of every death they had ever seen. They carved law into my bones. They set me to guard their story." Loneliness brushed against Jon's mind, vast and cold. It was not the loneliness of a man separated from his fellows. It was the loneliness of a mountain that remembered being lifted from the sea and stood now among stones that had forgotten the ocean. "Your kind broke that story," the Night King went on. "You tore the forest, bled the rivers, carved the hills for your walls. You made fire your god and forgot what burned before it. You broke the balance and thought the world would not notice." Jon remembered Maester Aemon's tales of the first long night, of the wars between the children and the first men, and the pact at the Isle of Faces. He remembered old Nan's stories of white shadows in the snow, stories men laughed at, stories men forgot. "So you march south to kill us all," Jon said. "To restore this balance." The blue eyes held him. "Ice must cover as much as fire burns," the thought came. "If one devours, so must the other. This is the law carved into me." "And if I refuse that law?" Jon asked. "If I fight you?" "You have already refused," the Night King said. "You lit your fires at Hardhome. You sent your ravens. You brought dragons into death's teeth. You stand here now." The presence pressed harder, not painful but inexorable. It was like standing in a river and feeling the current test your legs. "I cannot stop," the Night King said. "The wheel turns. The winter comes. Take. E dead answer. This is the story the children wrote." "Then why am I here?" Jon demanded. "If you can't stop, if you're nothing but a story someone else wrote." That made something stir behind those eyes. Not anger, not quite. "There is always a choice," the thought came, slower now, as if each word cost. "Even in stories, a river carved by a glacier may still choose how it falls." Jon had the sudden, dizzy sense of looking not at a monster, but at a man buried under so much ice and time that the shape of him had been nearly erased. Not kind, not human in any way he understood, but not mindless either. "What choice?" Jon asked. The mist thickened again. It rose in slow tendrils, curling around the White's legs, around the Night King's feet, around Jon's boots. It did not touch Ghost. It parted around the wolf as if unwilling to brush fur. The presence in Jon's mind turned, and the world turned with it. Not outward, but inward. Suddenly Jon was somewhere else. He stood in a forest that was not a forest. Every tree a white hand thrusting out of dark earth. Every branch a network of veins. The leaves were eyes, red and wet, watching. The sky above was a shivering canopy of bone. He heard voices, layers upon layers of them, overlapping in a cacophony. Whispers, screams, laughter, the muttering chant of battle prayers, the pleading of the dying, the lullabies of mothers in 100 tongues, all of them rising and falling like waves. At the center of it all stood a tree, older than the others. Its trunk was not merely white but shot through with gray and black, as if fire had licked its roots once and left scars. Its face was not carved but grown, features twisted and deep. Its eyes bled, red sap trembling on bark. A man was pinned to it. He had been a man once. Now his skin was mottled white-blue, his hair a brittle gray crown. Dragonglass jutted from his chest, buried to the hilt. His eyes glowed the same terrible blue as the Night King's, except they were not that king's eyes. They were human eyes poured full of winter. Children of the forest ringed him, small bodies hunched, long fingers sticky with blood. Their faces were not kind, neither were they cruel. They were focused, as a smith might be hammering a sword. Jon felt the dragonglass in that man's heart. He felt it sing. The scene shifted. The pinned man, no, the thing he had become, walked across a field of snow. Men died in front of him, their breath freezing in their lungs, their swords shattering. He raised his hands and they rose again, eyes blue. He walked and the world whitened behind him. He saw a keep on a hill, a ring of standing stones, a weirwood cloaked in ice. He saw dragons falling from the sky, fire smothered by snow. He saw the wall rise, but the wall did not keep him out, kept him in. He saw the children, fewer now, older, faces etched with regret. He heard their voices, thin as sapling branches. We bound him too well. We feared our own making. We chained winter to the north and told ourselves we had tamed it. But stories do not end while men still bleed. The vision twisted. Jon saw his own face, pale in death on the black ice of Castle Black's courtyard. He saw Melisandre's hands pressing against his chest, heard her prayers to Lawler, the Red God. He felt fire flood into him, different from the cold he had felt now, but no less binding. You carry two marks, the Night King's thought said. One of ice, one of fire. You are the crack between tales. You do not belong to their story or mine alone. The forest dissolved. Jon gasped, stumbling, and found himself again on the lake. The ice under his feet, the mist around him, the Night King standing 4 paces away. Ghost pressed closer, a solid weight. Jon's heart hammered. Sweat chilled on his spine despite the cold. What are you showing me? He managed. The bargain, the Night King said. The blue gaze did not waver. The law carved into me is simple. For every life that fire claims, ice must take one in turn. For every burning city, a frozen one. For every forest felled, a field buried. For every age of man, an age of winter. This balance holds the world. He raised a hand. It was a small motion, but the whites behind him shifted as one, a ripple in a sheet. Your kind have broken that balance, the thought pressed. Fire has burned too long. Cities rise upon cities. Forests fall and do not return. Your Red God drinks in wars like wine. The scales have tipped. Winter must answer or all stories end. Jon's breath clouded between them. I won't argue that we've done harm, he said. We are what we are. But wiping us all out isn't balance. That's an ending. All things end. Not today. You cannot know that. Jon's jaw clenched. You say there is a choice, that the river can choose its fall. He spread his hands slightly, empty palms shone. What is that choice? What do you want from me? The Night King's hand lowered. In the distance, a sound rose, a faint, thin howl. Not ghosts, higher, sadder. It might have been the wind. A king must offer himself, the presence said. One marked by both fire and ice. One whose blood ties the realms of dragons and wolves and the shadows between. One who has died and walked again. One who carries the memory of both gods. Jon remembered his father's face in the crypts. Ned Stark's and the other man's, Rhaegar's, whose story he had never lived, whose blood he carried like a stranger in his veins. He remembered the words of the Red Priestess from Volantis, with her hungry eyes fixed on Daenerys and then on him. The prince that was promised. His throat was dry. "All right," he said. "Suppose such a king stands before you. What happens if he offers himself?" Silence dropped. Even the faint crack of ice seemed to cease. The Night King looked at him, and Jon felt something move in that gaze like ancient roots shifting. "I will take you," the presence said. "I will carve my law deeper into your bones. I will pour into you every winter, every death that ice remembers. You will stand in my place." A hollow opened inside Jon, vast and bottomless. "You want me to become you," he said. "No." The word was ice on glass. "Not me. There is no me. There is only the shape carved by others. The law. You will be more, less, different. You will stand where I stood. You will hold winter in your hands. You will choose how it falls. And if I refuse?" "The law holds," the Night King said. "I march. I take as many lives as fire has taken. I sweep your cities and forests and fields. I drown your dragons in snow. I kill until the scales are level." Jon felt his stomach lurch. That would be a butchery, a slaughter. Yes, this is what I am bound to do. This is what they made of me. They gave me no kindness. They gave me law. "And if I agree?" Jon asked. The blue eyes pinned him. "Then winter stops at your word," the Night King said. "You send it where it must go to keep the scales. You choose what burns and what freezes. You hold the line." Images flared behind Jon's eyes again, unbidden. He saw King's Landing drowned in snow, its golden towers toppled, its people fleeing south or dying in white streets. He saw the Iron Islands swallowed by gray waves that froze mid-crash. He saw Old Town with its towering high tower, still standing under a soft fall of snow and unbroken light. He saw Winterfell buried to its battlements, then slowly shedding its ice as spring crept back. He saw Dorne, its red deserts dusted with frost that melted by noon. He saw the Dothraki Sea green and unburned, the cities of Slaver's Bay, Dragon's Bay now, Daenerys had insisted, rising, falling, rising again. He saw dragons flying over snow and sun, not as conquerors but as guardians maybe, or simply as themselves. He saw Arya, old and wrinkled, sitting by a fire somewhere far away, telling a story of a brother who had walked into winter and never walked out. He saw Sansa standing on Winterfell's walls, hair threaded with silver, watching children play in courtyards free of dead. He saw Daenerys on a balcony, hand resting on a swelling belly, laughing as a dragon swooped overhead. He saw himself nowhere. He saw instead something else. A figure standing always in snow, eyes not blue but something between, hair dark, hands white, watching, measuring, saying yes to some storms, no to others, feeling every life that winter took as a small pull in his chest, feeling every fire rage as a weight on his shoulders. "Is that saving the world?" Jon whispered. "Or damning it in a different way?" The Night King did not answer. He did not need to. The question was the bargain. "You will not be man," the presence said. "Not again. You will not hold a child or a sword with warmth in your fingers. You will not share a bed or a meal or a laugh. You will be story, memory, balance. You will be what they made me, but by your own will." "And in return?" Jon asked. "You stop. You turn back." "I end," the Night King said. "I return to the ice and sleep, if sleep remains. My story ends where yours begins." Jon drew a breath too sharp for his lungs. The air burned. "All men die," he said. "So do kings. Why should you be different?" Something almost like amusement flickered in the presence. "When the first man died, I had already been walking longer than his bones will ever remember. I do not fear ending. I fear law, chains, the story that will not bend. You are my crack in that story. Jon thought of chains. He had worn them around his wrists in a Bolton dungeon. He had felt them in the vows he had spoken on the wall, in the expectations laid on him by banners and blood. He had never imagined that the heaviest chains would be choices. If I become what you are, he said slowly, what happens to the rest of us? To the living? Do you swear that you will withdraw your dead? That you will let men live and die by their own hand, without winter marching at them with swords of ice? The word swear brushed his mind and stirred something old. Oaths, promises cut into flesh, the blood of the first men mixing with sap at the Isle of Faces. The children watching with eyes like polished stone. I will bind it into myself, the Night King said. Into you. Law can be rewritten, not erased, but bent. Jon's hand was still in Ghost's fur. He realized he was gripping so tightly his knuckles ached. Ghost whined, low and distressed, and licked his wrist. You ask me to sacrifice everything I am, Jon said, looking the Night King in the eyes. My life, my name, my future, for the rest of the world. Is that not what your Red Woman named you for? The presence asked. Azor Ahai reborn, the prince that was promised, the knife that ends darkness. Stories have always wanted you to burn. This isn't burning, Jon said. This is freezing, cold, fire, pain. The flesh cares for distinctions. Stories do not. Jon swallowed. What if I say no? He asked again quietly. Not as your chosen thing, but as myself. Jon Snow, son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, king in the north. What if I stand here and tell you that your law is unjust and I will not see it done? The mist swirled. For the first time, something like resistance pressed against him. Not anger, not outrage, just pressure. The weight of a glacier leaning on a valley. Then you will die, the Night King said. You and your wolves and your dragons and your red and white gods. I will walk to the ends of your lands and take as many souls as fire has taken. When I am done, the scales will be level. The world will be quiet. For a time. And after that, men will rise again from whatever ash remains. Fire will burn. Winter will remember. Another bargain will be needed, but there will be no one left marked by both gods. No one else to stand where you stand. There was no threat in it, only statement. Jon closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, memories rose. Robb laughing in the snow, younger than Jon, sword in hand, hair wild. You're too slow, little brother. Bran perched on a wall, eyes bright, calling down. Come on, Jon. You can't be afraid of heights all your life. Sansa singing in the courtyard, hands clasped, eyes always straying south toward golden things. Arya with mud on her face and a stick in her hand, jabbing at some imagined foe. Ned Stark's hand on his shoulder. You may not have my name, but you have my blood. Ygritte's smile in a cave, red hair spilling across stone. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Sam's terrified grin the first time he'd stood up to someone bigger than him. We're still here, aren't we? Davos's rough, weary voice. You're my king. I don't know what that means, but I know it's true. Then newer memories. Daenerys reaching for his hand on the ship, eyes full of fire and war and something more dangerous. You have to see it. You have to see what I see. Her face in the dragon pit, proud and wary and alone despite the roar of the crowd. Her breath in his hair the night before they rode for Winterfell. We'll break the wheel, and others, the men of the free folk, looking at him with hard, assessing eyes, then nodding just once. The Night's Watch brothers chanting his name, then plunging knives into his flesh. Melisandre's eyes as she looked at him, hope and hunger and a kind of desperate faith. Bran watching him with that cool, unfocused gaze, seeing not one Jon but all of them layered over each other like scars. He opened his eyes. The Night King stood where he had stood, unchanged. You said, law can be bent. Jon said. Not erased, not broken, but bent. If I agree to this pact, I want my own law written into it. The presence stilled, like wind holding its breath. Speak. You end your war, Jon said. Completely. No more marches. No more dead. You withdraw beyond the wall and stay there. Forever. Forever is not a word that holds. As long as men remember this bargain, then, as long as their descendants remember why winter does not march, when they forget, truly forget, when our stories have turned matters of life and death into children's tales, then winter can rise again. With their memory, you doom your grandchildren. I doom them to face the same choices I do, Jon said. And maybe they'll be better. Kinda. Smarter. I don't know. But I won't damn everyone who will ever live to die in snow for mistakes we've made now. Ghost made a sound that might have been approval. Or perhaps Jon only imagined it. The Night King's gaze did not shift from his face. And what else? The presence asked. Men must be free to wage their own wars, Jon said. To fall and rise without your hand pushing. This balance you speak of, it can't be used as a cudgel. Winter cannot fall on one side simply because you dislike who rules there or what god they call. You assume I care for your kings. You care for law. Law can be twisted. I've seen men do it all my life. I won't become another version of that. If I take your place, I want the right to refuse, to say no. If the scale tips, I will push it back. But not to the whims of lords and priests. You will judge. Yes. You will weigh billions of lives in your hands. Yes. You will fail. Yes. The admission surprised him with how easily it came. I'm no god, Jon said. I'm a bastard who got lucky and unlucky in equal measure. I've made mistakes. I'll make more. But I've seen what happens when no one stands between men and the dark. If this is the only way, I'll stand there. The presence pressed against him, testing. Not his words, but the thing behind them. The stubborn, mule-bone core that had dragged Jon through battles he did not want. Crowns he had not asked for. Love he had not believed he deserved. You would give up your name, the Night King said. Your face, your voice, your touch, all that you are. Jon looked beyond the Night King then, beyond the wall of whites, beyond the mist, as if he could somehow see through snow and distance all the way to Winterfell. He pictured Sansa in the hall, chin high, ghosts at her back. Arya on the road, somewhere no one expected, a list in her heart and a new one forming. Bran under the weirwood, eyes in the past and future. Sam in some tower of books, fat and happy and complaining. Tormund laughing in the snow. Gendry hammering steel. Missandei teaching children in the shadow of a broken pyramid. Grey Worm standing guard. The Hound grumbling by a fire, not admitting he was glad to be alive. Davos lighting candles for the son he'd lost. Daenerys standing on a balcony over some new city, not built from chains, but from choice. Dragons wheeling overhead, her hair loose in the wind, her eyes not haunted by the crackle of burning flesh, but bright with something like peace. He would not be there in any of those pictures, but they would happen. I died once, he said. I came back for a reason. Maybe this is it. Maybe I'm meant to walk into the dark so they don't have to. He thought of something Sam had said, half a lifetime ago in a cold room at the wall. You're not afraid to die. I am, Jon said now aloud. I've just done it enough to know fear doesn't change what has to be done. He tightened his hand in Ghost's fur. If I do this, I want one more law. The Night King waited. No matter what I become, Jon said, voice low. No matter how much winter you pour into me, I want a piece of me to stay. A memory, a heart, something that remembers who I was. I don't want to become just another story written by someone else. If I am to be your replacement, I want to be able to choose, every day, to remain myself. Ice does not remember warmth. It will, Jon said, if you let it, if you carve that into me as deeply as they carve their law into you. Call it my price. You bargain with winter as if it were a man at a market. Jon almost smiled. I've bargained with worse. ETH. Aught of Walder Frye, of Ramsay Bolton, of Cersei on her throne of knives, of gods demanding blood. At length the presence stirred. Very well, the Night King said. The words were not warm. They were not kind. They were simply acceptance. The mist behind him shifted. The whites stood straighter, skulls tilting as if listening. The ice under Jon's feet vibrated, faint but unmistakable, as if something vast stirred beneath. You will come to me, the Night King said. You will lay down your sword. You will open yourself. I will pour into you everything I am, and you will take it. You will take my chains and bend them. You will take my memories and add your own. You will stand at the wall not as a stone, but as a man who cannot fall. And your army? Jon asked. His throat felt tight. His legs felt hollow. His voice was steady. I will turn them, the Night King said. I will lay them down. The dead will return to their sleep. The snow will fall as snow, not as spear. The winter will remain, but it will not march. Jon drew a breath. One more thing, he said. The Night King stilled, and that stillness was a threat in itself. Daenerys Targaryen, Jon said. Her dragons, my family, my people, they are not to be touched by your hand. Ever. No matter what law demands. No matter what balance. If winter must take, it takes elsewhere. You would unbalance the scales for love. Yes, you doom others in their place. Yes, you ask winter to be partial. Yes. The presence probed his mind again, brushing across memories of Daenerys. Her face in firelight, her hand in his, the way she looked at him when she forgot for a heartbeat that she was a queen and he was a king. Love is a flame, the Night King said. It burns the world. I know, Jon said. The presence held him there in that admission, weighing it. Then, astonishingly, it relented. Very well, it said. Those of your blood. Those bound to you by your own oath. They will be last. If the scales can be reset without their deaths, they will live. If not, even you cannot deny law forever. Jon took that, knowing it was as much as he would ever get. And you? He asked. What happens to you when this is done? The Night King looked past him, toward the south, toward the faint line of the wall. I sleep, he said, or I break. It does not matter. And you begin. Jon straightened. Then let's end it. He drew Longclaw. The sound rang strange on the ice. Too loud, too thin. The wolf's head pommel gleamed, its red eyes dulled by frost. Ghost growled, low and pained. Jon reversed the sword, holding it out, hilt toward the Night King, blade lying across his palms. His breath clouded the steel. I swear, he said, voice carrying across the white lake. By the old gods and the new, by fire and ice, by my father's blood and my mother's song, I accept your bargain. The words felt heavy, like chains settling. Somewhere far away, Jon thought he heard the rustle of leaves on a tree that did not grow in any ordinary forest. The Night King extended his hand. His fingers were long, jointed wrong, tipped in nails like translucent claws. They reached over the distance like icicles stretching toward warmth. When he touched Longclaw's blade, frost raced along the steel, devouring the Valyrian ripples, swallowing the ghost wolf's head. The sword shuddered. Jon bit back a gasp as cold slammed up his arms. It was not like the cold of the lake. That was a thing of air and water. This was something foundational, a cold that lived in bones and stories. It surged into him through his hands, into his chest. He felt his heart stutter. Ghost yelped, leaping against him, teeth snapping at the Night King's arm, and passed through it, as though through smoke. Blue eyes bored into Jon, filling his world. In the distance, a roar split the sky, muffled by clouds. Regal, the Night King's presence surged. It did not enter gently. It tore. Memories rushed into Jon. Centuries, millennia of winter, of walking across frozen seas, of watching mountains rise and crumble, of seeing men discover fire and steel and arrogance, of hearing the children whisper in fear and awe, of feeling the dragon glass in his chest. Always, a burning shard of law. Jon screamed. He felt himself stretched, pulled apart, poured into something larger. He felt ice wrap around his thoughts, not smothering, but enclosing. He felt the law carve lines in him, balance. For every flame, frost. For every birth, a death. He felt himself recoil against it. No, the word was small, a spark in a blizzard. It should have vanished. It grew. No, not like this. Not without choice. Not without mercy. He clung to names as the cold tried to strip them away. Sansa, Arya, Bran, Sam, Davos, Tormund, Ygritte, Ghost, Daenerys. Daenerys. Her name burned brightest. He wrapped it around his mind like a cloak. He thought of her not as a queen on a dragon, but as a woman laughing as the wind tore at her hair on the bow of a ship, as someone who had stood in a far-off land and freed slaves because it was wrong that they were chained. He poured that into the cold. He felt the Night King's presence recoil, surprised, not by the emotion, but by the fact that it held. The law carved into him shuddered. Stories can be bent, Jon thought, or didn't think, exactly, but impressed into the shape of himself that was being carved. Behind his eyes, the vision of the weirwood forest flared again. The man pinned to the tree, the dragon glass in his chest, the children circling. This time, Jon was not just an observer. He stood in that forest and reached for the shard in that chest. He felt it under his fingers, humming with law. He tugged. Something cracked. In front of him on the lake, the Night King staggered. It was a tiny motion. No one else might have noticed, but Jon felt it as if the world itself had lurched. You cannot break what was written. The Night King's presence roared. Not in sound, be you. T in pure force. You will tear the world. Then we'll stitch it back, Jon thought. The cold surged again, harder, trying to crush that spark. Jon opened himself further. He let it in. He let the winter rush through him, not as an enemy, but as a river he could step into and, maybe, redirect. Filled him, yes. It burned his veins, crystallized his breath. It hardened his skin. But at the center of it, he kept that spark. He kept the memory of warm hands. He kept Ghost's fur under his fingers. He kept the sound of Arya's laughter. He kept the feel of Sansa's hug in the Godswood, awkward and fierce. He kept Sam's arms flung around him in joy when he'd returned from death. He kept Daenerys's lips on his, the way she had looked at him afterward as if terrified and freed at the same time. He wrapped winter around those things like armor. The Night King's scream tore through him. On the ice, his body convulsed. Cracks spiderwebbed from his feet, a white lightning bolt racing across the lake. The whites behind him shuddered, jerking like puppets whose strings had been cut and retied. The mist churned. Above, the clouds split for a heartbeat. Rhaegal's green form broke through, roaring, blue firelight reflected on his scales. He plunged, instinct driving him toward the figure that had taken Viserion. "Stay back!" Jon tried to shout, but his mouth no longer shaped the words. The sound that came out was a choking hiss of frost. Yet something in the air resisted the dragon. Rhaegal's wings flared. He banked, snarling, as if he had hit a wall of invisible glass. On the shore, far away, small figures ringed the lake. Men from Eastwatch, ravens. Perhaps, if he squinted that far in his mind, he might see a smaller shape on the wall. A woman with silver hair, knuckles white on a stone as she watched the sky. Jon's knees hit the ice. The Night King's hand still rested on Longclaw. Their gazes locked. Blue burned into gray. Jon saw, in that instant, the man beneath the ice. Not clearly. Not like a face he could put a name to. Just a sense. Of someone who had been chosen without being asked. Who had been sacrificed for a story. Who had walked the world for so long that he had forgotten his own language. "I did not choose," that presence whispered, for the first time sounding small. "I was chosen." "I choose," Jon thought said, forced through the roaring in his skull. "Now, so you don't have to anymore." The world turned. Then something snapped. The Night King shattered. There was no warning. One heartbeat he stood, hand on Jon's sword, eyes burning with endless winter. The next, lines of light raced across his form, fracturing him into 1,000 shards. Ice exploded outward, glittering in the gray air like a broken storm. The whites behind him collapsed. Some fell in pieces, limbs tumbling. Some simply crumbled where they stood, bones turning to powder, flesh sloughing away. The mist dissolved, revealing empty ice beneath. The crack in the lake stopped, frozen mid-race. For a terrible, breathless moment, there was nothing. No presence in his mind. No winter. No law. Nothing. Jon felt light, weightless, as if he had stepped off the wall and hung suspended in the air before the fall. Then the cold rushed back. Not from outside, from within. It rose from his chest, from the place where his heart beat. It flowed along his veins, out to his fingertips, down to his toes, filled his lungs, pressed against his skull. He gasped, and frost spilled from his mouth. Ghost whined, pressing against him, trying to shove him upright with his head. Jon looked down. Longclaw lay in his hands, the blade rimed with ice. The wolf's head pommel had changed. Its eyes were no longer red. They shone a pale, eerie green, like the reflex of northern lights on snow. His hands, they were white, not corpse white, not the blue-tinted pallor of the dead. They were like the surface of a snowbank. Fine lines of colorless grain, veins faintly visible like cracks. He flexed his fingers. Joints moved. He felt them. He placed a hand against his chest. His heart beat slow, steady. Each thud felt like an avalanche held in check. He rose. It was like standing with weights on his shoulders, and yet without. He felt the land under his boots not as a surface, but as a layer over something deeper. He felt the ice of the lake, the stone below, the bones buried in that stone. He felt the wall, distant, humming with old magic. He felt the forests, the rivers, the small fires in 1,000 hearths. He felt people, not their thoughts, not their secrets, just their presence, as small, warm flares against a vast cold. Ghost stepped back, hackles still raised, ears pinned. He growled, uncertain. "Ghost," Jon said. The sound that left his mouth wasn't entirely his old voice. It held an echo, as if someone else spoke with him a fraction of a heartbeat out of time. Ghost's growl cut off. The wolf cocked his head, sniffed, then trotted forward, pushing his nose into Jon's palm. His tongue was hot on Jon's cold skin. Relief punched through him so hard his knees almost buckled again. He laughed. The sound was wrong, a crackling thing like ice splintering, but it was his. In his mind, something ancient stirred. It unfolded slowly, like a creature that had been curled for too long. It was not the Night King, not anymore. It was winter, yes, but winter that now had to share space with something else. "You have taken the chains," the deep voice murmured. "I have," Jon said. "You have bound yourself." "I have. You cannot go back." "I know. You will watch everyone you love die." "I know." There was no anger in him at that, only a hollow sadness, familiar and finally, fully accepted. "What now?" he asked, the cold in his veins. "Now you choose," it replied. He closed his eyes. He turned his face south. He felt winter waiting at his call, eager and patient. He could send it in a wave, drown kings landing in snow strong enough to crack its gates. He could freeze the narrow sea from shore to shore. He could choke Dorne in blizzards until its sands became glass. He did none of that. Instead, he reached for the storm that had been building behind the wall, the one the Night King had gathered like a cloak to throw over the realms of men. It roiled, full of unspent rage. "Stop," Jon said. The storm shuddered. He felt it resist, not from malice, but from momentum. Law. It had been set in motion long ago. "Stop," he said again. "Stand down. Fall as snow where you must. Melt where you can. Turn aside from cities and villages. Seek empty ground. Seek sea. Dissolve." Slowly, reluctantly, the storm obeyed. North of the wall, clouds thinned. Snow that had fallen in sheets slowed to a drift. The howling wind eased to a whisper. On the wall, men who had huddled with blue lips felt their fingers tingle with returning warmth. They looked at each other, baffled, as if someone had turned an unseen key. In Winterfell, Bran Stark's eyes snapped open. He sucked in a breath and stared south, then north, then somewhere else entirely, as if seeing a rope that had been cut and retied. In the Godswood, Sansa felt the bite of the wind soften. She frowned up at the sky. In the courtyard, Arya paused mid-step, hand on needle's hilt, and tilted her head. "Ha!" she said to no one. On a ship somewhere near Dragonstone, Samwell Tarly looked up from a scroll and blinked, glasses sliding down his nose. "Gilly," he said slowly, "do you feel odd?" Gilly, who had grown used to oddness, shrugged. Above the lake, Regal roared again, circling. Jon looked up. "Go home," he said softly, reaching not with words, but with that new, strange sense that let him feel the dragon's fire like a sun through snow. Regal fought it for a moment, proud, stubborn beast that he was. Then he folded his wings and banked, turning away, flying toward the faint line of the wall. Jon turned back north. Behind him, the bodies of the dead lay still. They did not rise. He knelt and placed his hand on the ice. He felt the dead below the lake, the ones who had sunk with Viserion's corpse, the ones who had fallen in that first desperate battle. He felt their mute chill. "Rest," he whispered. The ice hummed. Far to the north, beyond any map men had made, something vast sighed. It was not relief, not exactly. More like resignation. The army of the dead did not vanish. Their bones did not vaporize. Their bodies remained. But the blue light in their eyes faded, leaving only emptiness. The cold in Jon's veins eased, just a fraction. Enough to let him breathe without feeling like glass. He rose. He stood alone on the lake, Ghost at his side, a sword of frozen Valyrian steel in his hand, and understood, really understood, that he would never again be only a man. But he was still partly a man, and there were things he needed to do before the last pieces of that were carved away. He turned south and began to walk. They saw him from the wall first. To the men on its height, he was a dark, small shape on the white expanse, a lone figure walking where no sane man would. At first they thought him a survivor of some doomed ranging. Then they saw the white wolf trotting at his side, and the word ran along the battlements in a hiss. Snow, Jon Snow, the king. Davos shoved his way to the parapet, heart hammering. He saw Jon's shape growing slowly larger, each step measured, steady. He saw no army behind him, no blue-eyed corpses, no storm. His knees almost gave. "Open the bloody gate," he rasped. They did. By the time Jon reached the shadow of the wall, his breath no longer fumed in the air. Not visibly. The cold around him seemed self-contained. Davos went down to meet him, boots sliding on frozen stone, hands shaking. The gate creaked open. Jon walked through. He was changed. Davos had seen dead men. He had seen men who had been dead and come back. Jon, when he'd returned from his first death, had been pale, haunted, eyes shadowed, but alive. This Jon. His skin was white, yes, but there was color still in his cheeks, a faint flush like the reflection of snow at sunset. His hair had more silver in it than Davos remembered. His eyes, always gray, now held shards of something that caught the light oddly, like ice. His breath did not smoke. Ghost padded at his side, close, protective. The wolf's fur was dusted with frost. Davos stopped in front of him. "Your Grace," he said hoarsely. Jon looked at him. For a terrifying moment, Davos saw nothing in that gaze but cold. Not malice, not even indifference. Just distance. The kind that rolled off mountains and gods. Then warmth flickered. "Davos," Jon said. His voice was wrong. It had an echo, a hollow. But the old cadence was there, the flat northern vowels. "You look like shit," Davos blurted. Jon's lips twitched. "So do you." Davos would have laughed if he hadn't been half a breath from sobbing. "What happened out there?" he demanded. "Where's the bastard?" Jon glanced back, over his shoulder, as if seeing something none of them could. "Gone," he said. "In a way. What does that even mean?" "Later," Jon said. He swayed. Ghost nudged his leg, worried. Davos stepped closer on instinct, hand going out to steady him. His fingers brushed Jon's forearm. Cold slammed through him. It was not enough to burn, but it was more than any human body should carry. He snatched his hand back, gasping. Jon flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "Sorry," he murmured. "I'm still. I don't know how to control." Davos gulped air, feeling frost in his lungs. "So you're telling me," he said, "you walked out onto that ice to make a deal with death itself and came back colder?" Jon's smile was brief and wry. "Something like that." Davos stared at him, at the new lines carved around his eyes, at the way light caught in his irises. "Yo, you bloody fool," he said, rough affection hiding behind the words. "What have you done?" "What I had to," Jon said. Davos swallowed curses and questions alike. "There's someone who needs to see you," he said instead. "Preferably while you're still you." Jon's gaze softened. "Daenerys, and half the bloody north," Davos said. "But let's start with her." Daenerys stood in the courtyard of Winterfell when they arrived. She had refused to wait inside. The hall was too small, the walls too close. She had paced the battlements, then the godswood, then the yard, wearing tracks into snow, until her legs had finally given up and she had stood in one place, fists clenching and unclenching. She had seen the storm ease. She had watched the sky clear above the wall. She had heard the ravens. But until she saw Jon with her own eyes, she refused to believe anything. When the gates opened and he rode through, no army at his back, no dead marching, only Davos and a handful of black-cloaked brothers. Her heart jolted so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. He swung down from the horse stiffly, as if his limbs were not entirely his. Ghost slid from the saddle and trotted ahead, nose low. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Daenerys walked forward. The crowd parted around her. Snow crunched under her boots. Her breath smoked in plumes. Her skin burned with cold, and something that felt like fury and relief twisted together until she couldn't tell one from the other. Jon stopped a few paces from her. If she had been anyone else, she might have flinched. He looked other, paler, thinner, harder. His eyes held a glint she had seen only in the dead. But he was still Jon. "Did you win?" she asked. It was a stupid question. There were no winners here, but it was the only one that mattered in that moment. Either he had come back with the world or without it. He took a breath. "I think so," he said. His voice made the hairs rise on the back of her neck, carried a chill that bit through furs. But it was his cadence, his phrasing. No grand speech, no boast. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What did you give him?" He looked at her, and she saw it. The absence. There had always been a weight in Jon, a sense of a man who carried too much. Titles, guilt, duty. Now that weight was turned outward. It was no longer just on his shoulders. It was in the air around him, in the set of his spine, in the way the snow seemed to curve around his boots. "I gave him me," he said simply. Her throat closed. He stepped closer. The air around him dropped a few degrees. The breath of the people nearby smoked thicker. Ghost's fur sparkled with fresh frost. Daenerys did not step back. "How much of you is left?" she asked, voice low. He searched her face, and for a moment she saw only a man, tired and afraid and trying not to show it. "Enough," he said. "For now." Her hand lifted of its own accord. She hovered it before his chest, not quite touching. "May I?" she asked. He swallowed. "You might not like it. I've never much liked what I've found in men's hearts," she said. "Yours was an exception." Something like pain flickered across his face. "Go ahead," he murmured. She laid her palm flat against his chest, over where his heart beat. Cold. Gods, he was cold. Not the chill of someone who'd been north too long. Not the cold of a corpse. It was deeper, more structural, as if he were made of a different material now. But beneath it, she felt it. Thud, slow, heavy, deliberate. His heart. She closed her eyes. Is he gone? She whispered. Jon hesitated. In the way he was, he said. Yes, the army is down. The storm is easing. The dead are resting. I feel them. She opened her eyes, looking up into his. What are you now? She asked. His lips twisted. I don't know, he said. Something between. Not the Night King. Not just Jon Snow. Something. He searched for a word and gave up. I can feel winter. I can ask it to move. Or not. You're telling me, she said slowly, that you can control the seasons. Not like a switch, he said quickly, as if he feared her ambition more than her fear. I can nudge, guide. There are laws, chains. I can bend them. I can't break them. But it's enough. She thought of kings landing under ash and snow, of slavers' cities burning, of Dothraki plains gone dry and cracked. She thought of what she could do with that power. Then she thought of what it had cost him. You did this to save us, she said. To save them. He nodded, her hand fisted in his cloak. You stupid, honorable, bloody northern idiot, she whispered. He almost smiled. I love you too, he said. Something stuttered in her chest. Do you? She asked. Still? Like this? He looked down at her hand on his chest, then back up. Yes. The word was quiet. No proclamation. No oath. Just a fact. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, stinging in the cold. You could have died, she said, the fury finally breaking through. You could have let him march and fought him with dragons and swords and fire. You could have left the world to burn or freeze and taken what you wanted and left the rest to ash. It would have been easier. Easier doesn't mean right, he said. You think I don't know that? She snapped. You think I haven't burned for the sake of something I thought was right? He flinched, as if those words had teeth. I didn't do this without thinking about you, he said. About what it would mean. For us. Us, she repeated. Is there an us now? Ghost huffed impatiently, like a third, furry party to the conversation. I don't know what I'll be in a year, Jon said. Or 10. I don't know how much of me will still be me. But right now I'm here. And he swallowed. The words seemed harder for him now, but not for lack of wanting. I want to spend whatever time I have as myself with you. If you'll have me, knowing what I am. She laughed, brokenly. You absolute fool, she said. You think I crossed the world, built an army, hatched dragons, loved and lost and climbed onto a dragon's back to fight death itself so I could be afraid of a little cold? Her hand slid up, fingers curling around his neck. He stiffened, a subtle jerk, as her warm skin met his chill. She ignored it. She pulled him down and kissed him. The cold in him surged toward her, eager, instinctive, like a winter wind rushing to smother flame. For a heartbeat, she felt the edge of it, the way it wanted to seep into her bones. Then it stopped. He stopped it. His hands, cold as stone, came up to cradle her face, gentle, careful, as if he feared he might break her. She tasted snow and iron and something that might have been relief. The world narrowed to that, to his mouth on hers, to Ghost's impatient circling, to the distant murmur of people who didn't know whether to cheer or cross themselves. When they broke apart, her lips ached from cold, but her heart burned. You're freezing, she said. You're warm, he replied. Then we'll balance each other. He huffed out something like a laugh. Behind them, Sansa cleared her throat. They turned. The courtyard was full now. Northern lords, their men, the unsullied wildlings' servants, all of them staring at the man who had walked into winter and the woman who had flown over it. Sansa stepped forward, cloak wrapped tight, hair bright against the gray. What did you do? She asked bluntly. Jon weighed what to say. The short version, Daenerys murmured. I made a bargain, Jon said. His voice carried, not loud, but strangely resonant. The dead will not march on us. The storm is ending. Winter will still come, but it won't come with swords. I will see to that. Murmurs rippled. And the cost? Sansa asked. He met her eyes. Me, he said. Something flickered in her face. For an instant, the mask of Lady Stark cracked and a girl's raw hurt bled through. You always do this, she said, voice trembling. Throw yourself at monsters until they stop moving. Someone has to, he said gently. And it always has to be you, she spat. It doesn't, Daenerys said quietly. But it was, this time, and we're not going to waste it. Heads turned toward her. She stepped closer to Jon, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The air between them steamed faintly, warm and cold wrestling. Winter is ending, she said. We have a world to rebuild, a better one. If he is to stand at the edge of it, holding back the dark, then we make damn sure the light is worth guarding. Her words lit something in the air. The northern lords shifted. They looked at one another, at Jon, at the dragons beyond the walls. Arya appeared at Sansa's shoulder. She gave Jon a long look, eyes scanning him as if searching for cracks. How long do you have? She asked. Years, Jon said. I think. That's not very precise, she said. I'm still getting used to this. She nodded as if accepting that a man becoming winter was a thing one might reasonably need time to adjust to. Well, she said, better make them count then. She stepped forward and hugged him. The shock of warmth against his cold body almost knocked the breath from him. She held him tighter than she ever had, as if daring the chill to bite. You're still my brother, she muttered into his furs. I don't care if you're also winter itself. If you start making stupid decisions from your new throne of frost, I'll come north and stab you myself. He laughed, the sound cracking the air. I'll count on it, he said. When she pulled back, her nose was pink, her eyes bright. Try not to doom us all, Jon Snow, she said. I'll do my best, he answered. Bran's mouth curved, not quite a smile. That depends on what you do with it, he said. The connection snapped. Jon stood in the courtyard again, the noise of men and wolves and dragons filling his ears. He took a long breath. The cold in his chest pulsed once. Steady. He had made his choice. He would stand at the edge of the world. He would hold winter in his hands. He would watch everyone he loved grow old and die while he remained, a story etched into ice. He would do it gladly for them. But he would also live while he could. He turned to Daenerys. Shall we begin? He asked. She arched a brow. Begin what? Breaking the wheel, he said. Building something worth protecting. I can't promise I'll be here forever, but I can promise you a long summer. Her smile was slow, dangerous, full of promise. Then we'll make it a summer they sing about for 1,000 years, she said. He held out his hand. She took it, her warmth seeping into his cold fingers, his chill cooling her fire. Around them, winter eased its grip. Above, clouds parted, letting a shaft of pale sun spear down onto the courtyard. It glittered on Ghost's fur, on the dragon's scales, on the faces of men and women who had seen the end of the world and found, instead, a new beginning. Far to the north, beyond the mapped lands, in some forgotten valley of stone and snow, something vast and old lay down at last. Not dead. Not gone. Sleeping. And at the wall, in a small chamber of black stone, a man who was no longer entirely a man closed his eyes for a moment and listened to the world breathe. He knew there would be hard choices ahead. Places where the scales would tip and he would have to decide who froze and who burned. He knew he would fail, so, me times. He knew there would be days when the cold in him would whisper that it would be easier to let it all end. But he also knew the sound of his sister's laughter, the weight of a woman's hand in his, the steady loyalty of a wolf at his side. He knew, now, that even winter could remember warmth. And for as long as he did, Westeros had a chance.